The ballot counter is preparing a final ballot allocation report. Her job is to check the ballots that require reconfirmation, and allocate the votes to the right candidates. The report is rather simple. The first column shows the number of confirmed votes for each candidate, which is already printed on the report. The reconfirmed ballot allocation is entered in second column. Total allocation is 105. 28 ballots were found invalid. The last column is the combined total of the first two columns, the final vote count for each candidate. The report appears almost finished. All she needs to do now is sum up the vote count. But the observer notices immediately, the vote count for the first candidate, who's a member of the ruling party, is wrong. The count is over by more than 100. It should be 1806. The observer waits to see if the ballot counter corrects the error. With the presence of the observer, however, the ballot counter begins to act strangely. She stops from entering the column total, and starts to crunch some numbers. Perhaps she's double-checking the number. But the ballot counter doesn't make any entry. Instead, she distracts the observer by doing something else. She reaches for a reference guide of some sort. The observer waits patiently. Then she comes back to the report, taps on the column as if she's stuck. But with a single glance at the top, anyone could find the problem like the observer did. Distraction continues. She spins the pen between her fingers, then enters a few irrelevant numbers into the calculator. After many calculations, she appears stuck again. Perhaps she wants the observer to stop the recording, and leave. She calculates more numbers, and finally writes something on the report. It's the total number of printed ballots, which is the sum of these numbers. But why take so long, when she had those three numbers already? She hasn't yet corrected the error. It's still pending. She pretends to calculate again, then digs out a manual, or whatever it may be. The observer then becomes suspicious that the first candidate's overstated vote count may not be a miscalculation. As more strange behavior takes place, the observer pieces the puzzle. The overstated vote count for the first candidate, which first thought as a simple calculation error, actually includes all of the allocated votes. It even includes the 28 invalid votes. Then the first candidate's reconfirmed ballots were added again to get the total vote count. Too strange to be a coincidence, that miscalculated vote count for the first candidate happens to be 1939. The silent filming by the observer is making the ballot counter nervous. She finally enters the total vote count from all candidates. The number she entered is 2804. She's added these two. If she adds the 28 invalid votes, then the total vote count will match the number of ballots printed. Without the observer, the report could be finished at this point. But the ballot counter knows if the column is added vertically, she won't get the same result. The observer is watching and filming. The ballot counter decides to correct the first candidate's inflated vote count. But she almost wrote the correct number instantly. She pulls back and pretends to use the calculator to get the correct number. 1806. Then she finally makes the correction. She then signs the report. Now the report is finished. The observer zooms camera to make sure the vote count is correct. The silent filming of the observer has forced the ballot counter to make the correction. The persistence paid off. The voters who watched the footage raised suspicions that the vote count for the first candidate was already set. And the ballot counter was doing a reverse calculation when she was approached by an observer.